Hello everybody and welcome back to the Logan Blackman Show YouTube channel. I hope you all had a fantastic day because it has not been very long since the last time we have seen each other here on the Logan Blackman Show YouTube channel, as you may have figured out by this point. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't, and if so, check the video check the video out in the description down below. But we posted a video yesterday. We posted a video on yesterday. I know, crazy stuff going on here in the Logan Blackman Show YouTube channel. And we are here today to bring you episode 2 of our State of Iowa season preview. So obviously in episode 1, which again you can check out in the description down below, was for the Iowa Hawkeyes. This one, episode 2, is for the Iowa State Cyclones. And it's funny, like, looking at the expectation levels for each team going into the season, they're completely different. They're absolutely completely different. For all the question marks Iowa has on the opposite side of the ball, just because of Brian Ferentz, the offensive line, and all that stuff, Iowa State's got more. Iowa State's got more because they were hit so hard by the gambling probe. Like, Iowa State were, like, target number 1, and out of one target, by the way, they were just shamelessly just battered in Iowa State, more so than Iowa. Like, Iowa lost a few players, yes. They had some players suspended, but Iowa State's losing their starting quarterback in Hunter Deckers. They're losing their number 1 running back in Jarrell Brock. They're losing their number 1 tight end in Hanukkah. Like, they are losing some key players on the offensive side of the ball. Not to mention, they have a new offensive coordinator. Now, a lot of Iowa State fans out there are very happy Tom Manning left, and rightfully so. But it'll be interesting to see how Nate Shea's former Illinois quarterback will do in his first year as offensive coordinator, especially with all these, again, question marks on this offensive side of the ball. Like, we don't even know who their starting quarterback is at this point. Like, if you read Iowa State's depth chart, it's just a bunch of ors. Like, it's just or. There's no, like, definitive answer for a lot of these positions. And the quarterback's the main position on the field. The quarterback's the most important position in sports. And if you don't have one, you got some serious problems going into the season. Iowa State had these question marks after the Hunter Decker situation. And some may even say before the Hunter Decker situation, because he wasn't very good last year. He had moments. Sure, he had some moments. He's got talent. Like, if you're building a quarterback, you're building someone that looks somewhat like Hunter Deckers. Like, he's got the size. He's got the mobility. He's got a decent arm. Like, he's got things you want, but he just didn't really click in his first year as a starting quarterback, and turns out to be the only year as a starting quarterback at Iowa State. Like, you go into the season with Rocco Becht, who's played for Iowa State before, who has some minutes under his belt for Iowa State. Not a lot, but he has some. And, like, if you give Rocco Becht the starting job, which it looks like he'll be the starter week 1 against UNI, Lord knows if that changes going to week 2 against Iowa, but we'll get to the schedule here in a little bit. But you got Rocco Becht. Like, Iowa State should put forth a, like, I don't know what they're called. Like, Iowa State should be given some sort of award or something, or like for having the coolest named quarterbacks of the 21st century. Like, Rocco Becht, sick name. And then you got the likes of Steele Jantz, sick name. And then you got Kyle Kempt, sick name. Seneca Wallace is a sick name. Like, you've got to go for it. Like, Rocco Becht and Steele Jantz are beautiful names, absolutely beautiful names. But we'll see if that carries on throughout the rest of the season. And we brought up the or stuff, like it's Rocco Becht or J.J. Cole, the true freshman quarterback out of Ankeny, and he just absolutely dwarfs me. Like, I feel like I'm a normal-sized individual. I'm at 6 foot, I'm about 210. Like, I feel like I'm a semi-average, normal individual, and he makes me feel like I'm a freaking toddler. This dude's huge. This dude's absolutely huge. And he's 18 years old. Now, he's a little bit more athletic. He's a little, I will admit, I will fold on this one. He's a little bit better at the quarterback position. That's fine. That's fine. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about me today. We're not talking about me in this video. We're talking about the Iowa State Cyclones. And J.J. Cole is what a lot of people would like to see, I would imagine. Just get something new. Like a true freshman quarterback going in there. The chance of him being thrust out there by Matt Campbell week 1 being the main star, I think, are pretty slim. But I could be wrong. I could be, maybe Matt Campbell goes out there with J.J. Cole. I almost said Kyle Kempt. But Rocco Becht or I did it again. Rocco Becht or J.J. Cole. You also got Tanner Hughes there as well, who went to a college. He's a transfer, JUCO transfer. Went to a JUCO that some other famous quarterback went to back in the day. Now, who knows if he could become as good as that quarterback? We might need to see him at Iowa State, because Iowa State could be sitting on the next great New York Jet. And as we know in the New York Jets' recent draft history, they love themselves some Iowa State Cyclone players. They just recently drafted Will McDonald in the first round this year. And obviously got Breece Hall. They signed Alan Lazard this year. Like, they've got a vast contingent of Iowa State Cyclone football players. And speaking of Will McDonald, just looking at the defensive side of the ball real quick, losing someone like Will McDonald is not easy to replace. He's not someone easily replaced because of the fact this is the Big 12's all-time leading sack getter. Like, this is a guy that is a freaking mauler. He's a freaking dude. And you play in a 3-4 or whatever, 3-3-5 defense, whatever Iowa State technically calls their defense, and you're not very big. Like, you see 3-4 defensive ends. They're usually like pushing 280, 290 some of them. Some of them pushing 300. Will McDonald is like 250. And he's the Big 12's all-time leading sack leader with his hand in the dirt every single time. He's built like an outside linebacker, but he's playing defensive end. That is impressive as hell. And having Peterson there, will he be able to replace him? He's got some talent. We will see if he is able to replace the great Will McDonald for Iowa State. But going back to the opposite side of the ball, we brought up Breece Hall and Allen Lazard. The wide receiver core and the running back room are going to be, talking points again. Because when you look at Matt Campbell's tenure at Iowa State, he's had some very good running backs. We brought up Breece. You bring up David Montgomery as well. And Iowa State just didn't have the consistency from the run game last year. Now, a lot of that could go similarly to that of Iowa. A lot of that could go down to the offensive line, which is why they brought in Ryan Clanton from UNI, which is a great hire for Iowa State to improve their offensive line. It won't be like an immediate fix or anything, but they should be improved on what they were last year. But in the running back room, you got Cartavius Norton and you got Eli Sanders. Norton was obviously the number 2 back behind Drill Brock last year, but we will see his role significantly increased with Brock not being on the team. And on the receiving core, you lost Xavier Hutchinson. For all of his stuff that he did at Iowa, was a great player at Iowa State. He made the Texans 53-man roster. Very cool stuff. But the one thing I will always remember about Xavier Hutchinson is that weird-ass jump drop thing against Texas. I don't understand what was going on there. I really don't understand what's going on there. That's a game Iowa State really should have won. We'll get to Iowa State's record later on in the video, like what they did last year, but that was weird. That was very weird, but that's a lot of production gone. That's a lot of production gone. So you're going to need someone like Jalen Knoll to step up this year, who was on the team last year, put up decent numbers in a wide receiver 2 role for Iowa State. And then you also brought in Jaden Higgins from Eastern Kentucky, who was a decent 1,000-yard receiver role there. Now going to Iowa State, being that big-bodied wide receiver that Xavier Hutchinson was, we'll see if he's able to replicate some of the things that he did with whoever is at the quarterback position. But again, it all starts with the offensive line. Matt Campbell will want solid play from the offensive line, and he'll want consistency in the run game. If he has those two things, Iowa State could be a lot better than what most people, including myself, are expecting this year. Like, a lot of my friends out there are Iowa State fans. I went to Johnston, so there's a big Iowa State contingent there. And the expectations going into the season are just not very high. Like, I was doing a fantasy draft last Saturday, and 2 of my friends that were there are Cyclone fans. They were sitting there like 6-6 is like, that's a good season. Like, being bowl eligible is the kind of, this is what we want to see from a season this year. Because there's just, again, so many question marks, especially again on the opposite side of the ball. But we'll see how that goes. Defensively, we know they're going to be solid. Especially in the secondary. Brought up Will McDonald before on the defensive line, but the secondary will be fine. You got TJ Tampa, who's one of the best cornerbacks in college football. You got Purchase opposite of him. You got Frailer in the secondary as well. And you also got Jeremiah Coopers. Like, you've got a very, very solid secondary in place of guys that have been starters at Iowa State for a while now. And then you also got Gary Vaughn in the linebacking core, led the team in tackles last year. Like, Iowa State will be fine defensively. They'll be fine defensively. It all comes on the opposite side of the ball. It sounds like we're saying similar things to that of what we did in the Iowa video, but that's just the case for these Iowa teams this year, especially the Big 2 teams in Iowa. But one thing that's kind of hurt Matt Campbell more than anything kind of in recent years, which is the exact opposite of Iowa recently, is the special teams game. Iowa State finally hired a special teams coordinator this offseason, but that's been a big issue. A lot of their games could have been settled by made field goals. So we're going to need to see Jace Gilbert definitely up his game from last year. He went 12 of 20 last year and 3 from 8 from field goals of 40 to 49 yards. It's not ideal. And maybe a special teams coordinator comes in and fixes things right away, but they just definitely need to improve in that department. Like, a lot of their games last year, as we brought up earlier, were the tiniest of margins saw them lose games. Like, they went 4-8 last year, and there's a difference between the 4-8 that we saw last year from Iowa State and like the 4-8s that we saw when like I was growing up, where we had like Gene Chizik and all those guys were like go 2-10 or 3-9 or things like that. Like, this 4-8 season, they had 6 losses by 7 or less points. 6 losses by 7 or less points. Like, they lost by 7 against Baylor. They lost by 3 against Kansas. They lost by 1 against the Big 12 champs, Kansas State. They lost by 3 against Texas. We brought up the Xavier Hutchinson jump catch thing that could have potentially won them the game. He wasn't in the end zone, but it would have put them in a very good spot. Then you got the Oklahoma State game. They lost by 6, and you lost to Texas Tech by 4. These are fine margins, and we're talking about a completely different season for Iowa State last year if these results, flip on their head. Like, we're talking about a completely different season. Now, I don't want to go, I saw this on Twitter recently. Twitter's a great place for very smart, intellectual people to spread their very smart and intellectual opinions. But I saw a take on Twitter. It was like, Matt Campbell's on the hot seat if Iowa State finishes below 500 this year. No. Matt Campbell has done so much for Iowa State in recent years. Like, they went to the freaking Fiesta Bowl a couple years. I don't think you understand who you're dealing with here. Like, this isn't Nebraska. This isn't Miami. This is Iowa State. They don't have a vast history in football. Matt Campbell is the greatest coach in Iowa State history. He has to do some egregious things to be put on the hot seat. I don't even know if Iowa State could go 0-12 this year and lose Matt Campbell. I don't think that would be possible. I think Matt Campbell's done too much for this university for him to be, quote unquote, on the hot seat. I refuse to believe that's the case. Like, Matt Campbell is always talked about taking one of the top positions in college football or even going to the NFL. He was linked to the Jets job not too long ago, and they're trying to sweeten the deal for him by drafting all of his former players. But Matt Campbell, yeah, he's not on the hot seat, especially if Iowa State doesn't do good this year, which is kind of the expectation going into this season. The big thing is no one knows how this team will be because of the aforementioned question marks on offense. Defense, they're going to be fine. You got a new offensive coordinator, you got a new O-line coach, you got a new quarterback, you got new running backs, new receivers. Like, there's so many things that, need to go right for Iowa State here, and they got a hard schedule. They've got a hard schedule this coming season, and it starts off with UNI, a team that always plays Iowa State tough. When you look at Matt Campbell's tenure at Iowa State, when you look at Matt Campbell's aggregate score in his week 1 matchups, he's losing. He's losing this game. You take out the game last year against Southeast Missouri State, Matt Campbell's aggregate score is 124 to 129. Now, I add again the Southeast Missouri State because I know that game counts. It happened last year, and they blew them out of the water. They won 42-10. But with that score, it's only 166 to 139. And week 1 is where you're supposed to be playing these weaker teams. And UNI always turns up against Iowa State. Always turns on against Iowa State. Like, you look at Matt Campbell's first game at Iowa State was against UNI. Lost 25-20. His next game they won, beat UNI 42-24. And then they lost Iowa 13-3. They beat UNI in 3 overtimes in a weird game, 29-26. Then you had Louisiana. They lost 31-14. Billy Napier. Now in Florida, you had Levi Lewis there as well. And you had UNI last year, or 2 years ago, sorry. They beat UNI 16-10, and last year obviously beat Southeast Missouri State 42-10. Like, Matt Campbell does not really like to show a lot. He doesn't. And this year, with I sound like a broken record here. With the question marks going into the season for Iowa State, I wouldn't be too surprised if UNI came into Ames and beat Iowa State week 1. Like, this is a very talented UNI Panthers team. We'll go through their whole preview tomorrow, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe and like this video so you can stay updated more Logan Blackman Show videos, and also check out all the other links in the description as well, because you can go check out our social media pages if you would do so. Obviously, check out the podcast as well on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search Logan Blackman Show. It'll pop up. Thank you very much. Like, this is a very talented UNI Panthers football team led by arguably the best quarterback in the state in Theo Day, with some very good wide receivers that a lot of them are returning. He only lost 2 receivers from last year. A lot of his main people are back. The O-line's got some question marks. He's got 4 new starters there. But this could be a game where UNI catches Iowa State. This could be one of those things where you're trying to figure things out. You're trying not to do too much before the game against Iowa. And pow, UNI takes advantage of that, and UNI goes out a victor. Like, I think that could happen. You look at the game, 16-10 game. Will McElvain was the quarterback that game. Theo Day, who we just brought up, came into the season later against Sacramento State, and UNI's offense started to get an uptick. Like, if Theo Day played that game against Iowa State, does UNI win that game? I think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think UNI wins that game if Theo Day starts. But I think UNI will win. I do think, again, with all the question marks they have on offense, I think UNI will be able to take advantage with some experience they have on the offensive side of the ball. Mark Farley always plays this game tough. Matt Campbell doesn't show anything week 1. I think the safeness of this game from Iowa State and I'm not even going to say it because I've said it 1,000 times in this video. I think that will help UNI, and I think UNI will get the dub here. Going into week 2, if you watch the Iowa preview, you can go check that out again in the description or the YouTube channel in general. We think Iowa's going to win this game. There's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think there's a lot of expectations going in this game for Iowa State fans. Iowa's expecting to win this game. So maybe Iowa State could catch them off guard in this one, but we're going to go Iowa here. I think the defense will be able to stifle Iowa State's offense, and I think Iowa's made enough improvements on the offensive side of the ball to get them over the edge in this game. I don't want to say it'll be an easy game for Iowa, but I don't really think it'll be like insanely close going to this. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that, but I do think Iowa pulls away and gets a dub here in Ames. Then week 3, Iowa State's got their home and home matchup against Ohio, and Ohio's already played. Ohio played week 0, and they lost to San Diego State 13-20, and Curtis Rourke is coming back from a torn ACL, so he didn't really play the whole game, but he went 10 for 8. He went 8 for 10 with 75 yards. Didn't have a touchdown in the game. Also had negative 10 rushing yards as well. Still trying to work his way back. If he's in this game for Ohio against Iowa State, that could make this completely different because he's a very good quarterback. You're looking at the lower level, like outside the Power 5 conference, one of the better quarterbacks at that level. Rourke is definitely one of those guys. And then you look at a player like Bangura, who had 1,000 yards rushing last year. His first game had 65 yards rushing. And then you look at the weapons on the outside. Wiglew's 10 catches, 103 yards in this game. Jacoby Jones, not that one, not the kick returner for the Ravens, but Jacoby Jones didn't play in that first game against San Diego State. One would expect him to be back in this game against Iowa State. Like, Ohio returned 9 starters from last year. They were my pick to win the MAC. This is at Ohio. But that being said, I do think Iowa State, who blew them out last year, I don't think this game will be a blowout like we saw last year in Ames. I do think it will be relatively close, but I do think Iowa State has enough in the tank to get over the edge against a MAC team in Ohio for week 3. Get their first win of the season. And then week 4, you got your first Big 12 matchup against Oklahoma State. We got Alan Bowman returning to the Big 12 because remember, he went up to Michigan. He was at Texas Tech before, went up to Michigan, kind of got lost in the pile up at Michigan behind J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara. But we got Alan Bowman back in the Big 12. Solid quarterback. We just haven't seen him play in a while. And this is an Oklahoma State team that could be good. This is a team that was in the Big 12 championship a couple of years ago. They're really solid defensively, namely with Colin Oliver at linebacker and Kendall Daniels at rover and Corey Black at corner. Like, this is a solid defensive unit, but there's going to be, again, some question marks on the offensive side of the ball with Alan Bowman because we just don't know. We haven't seen him play. We haven't seen him playing forever. And he lost Spencer Sanders. He left in the transfer portal going to Ole Miss to compete with that starting job with Jackson Dart. And he did manage to get Deshaun Stribling in from Washington State, who was their leading receiver last year. So you did manage to get him in, but you lost your leading back from a season before as well to Baylor. So it'll be an interesting game, but it being at home, I do think I'm going to give this one to Iowa State. We're going to go Iowa State 2-2 on the season, losing to Iowa, losing to UNI, but beating Ohio and Oklahoma State. And then week 5, you go to Norman, Oklahoma. And this is a game, like we talked about the games that were close last year. The game against Oklahoma was not a close game last year. And it wasn't like an insane game. It wasn't like a 63-0 blowout or a 63-point win that we saw like TCU have against them. But still, 27-13 win is a loss, I guess. Loss is not ideal. It's not ideal, but Iowa State going to Oklahoma, they've beaten Oklahoma and Oklahoma before with better Oklahoma teams. Granted, maybe better Iowa State teams as well, but they have beaten Oklahoma and Norman. And this is an Oklahoma team that is, interesting because it's a team that lost a lot of people last year. They lost their head coach, lost the Heisman champion or Heisman winner Caleb Williams, lost a lot of key pieces. And going into this season, you lost Marvin Mims at wide receiver, and you lost Eric Gray at running back. You got 2,000-yard people right there. So you're going to need the likes of Marcus Major and Jaleel Farouk to definitely take those steps up there this year for quarterback Dylan Gabriel, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. Had a solid enough season last year, but a little bit lower than expectation, which I guess you could say about the entire Oklahoma team in general. And then on the defensive side with Brent Venables being a defensive guy, you're going to have a solid defensive line. He came over from Clemson, who is known for having a good defensive line. So Oklahoma defensive line will be solid, which could cause some problem for Iowa State offensive line. And a linebacking core will be solid there as well, namely Danny Stutzman. But I will say Oklahoma wins this one. I don't think Iowa State will go down there and upset them. I could be wrong, but I do think I'm going to go with Oklahoma in this one. I do expect Oklahoma to be a lot better, at least decently, and a good amount better than what we saw from them last year. I don't know if I'd say Big 12 championship or anything, but I do think they'll be better than what they were last year. And then week 6, they go against TCU. Again, this is a game we talked about a little bit ago where they actually blew them out of the freaking water. Now, this is a new TCU team. You only got 3 returners on offense. Like, you lost Max Duggan at quarterback, who's a Heisman finalist. You lost Kendra Miller at running back. You lost Quentin Johnston. You lost Steve Avila on the offensive line. Like, you lost some key pieces on the offensive side of the ball. You also lost Travius Hodges Tomlinson at the quarterback spot. Now, Granted, TCU defensively should still be fine. Like, you got Josh Newton at corner, you got Bud Clark at safety. They should be relatively fine in the secondary, but there's going to be a lot of question marks going into the season for offense. But people forget, Chandler Morris was a starter at TCU before Max Duggan. He got hurt last year early on in the season, which allowed Max Duggan to come in and, have the season that we and have the season that we saw from him. But Chandler Morris is a good option at quarterback. Very athletic due to the quarterback position is what Sonny Dykes likes from the position. I don't think this will be a blowout like we saw last year, and TCU is going to be one of those teams that's obviously going to take a little bit of a dip from what we saw last year. I have a hard time believing that they're going to go to the national championship again. We're not going to talk about what happened in the national championship game, but I have a hard time thinking they're going to go back to that spot. They're going to be a good team, but going back there, it'll be a big ask. It'll be a very big ask, especially with all the key members of your offense you lost last season. I do think TCU will go away with a win here. Being at Jack Trice will be tough, but I do see TCU getting the dub here. And then week 7, you go to Cincinnati, one of the first newcomers Iowa State plays this year. And Cincinnati, man, you lose Luke Fickell, so you got a new head coach in there. You lost a lot of key players, or a lot of players just in general on your team. Like this season, we brought up TCU only having 3 starters returning. Cincinnati's the same way, but they just brought in 100 freaking transfers. Like Emory Jones is in at quarterback, transfer from Arizona State. Remember when he was at Florida, he was the starter above Anthony Richardson at one point, and maybe Anthony Richardson would have taken that job a little bit sooner had he not gotten hurt at the end of the game against USF, a game where he had 100 yards passing, 100 yards rushing, when Emory Jones threw a couple of pretty bad interceptions. But apart from Emory Jones, you're bringing in a lot of new people. You got a whole new group of receivers. So you're going to have, I'm intrigued to see how the chemistry works between Jones and these receivers, because you got the likes of Xavier Henderson, you got Braden Smith, D. Wiggins, and Donovan Ollie, and you got Braden Smith, who's a certified pilot. How are you going to compete with a certified pilot? I don't know if you can, but how will all these new players mesh together? This will be a thing to see, especially with a new head coach. Who knows how this team will be this year, but I do think going to Cincinnati, which has been a tough place to play in recent years, I'm going to say Cincinnati gets the dub here over Iowa State. And continue on our road course, we got going to Baylor. And this is a game I was at last year. I went to the game against Baylor last year. I went down to Waco. I got a friend got married down in Hillsboro, Texas last year. So we took a picture next to the RG3 statue. We took a little detour down to Waco. It's like a half hour away from Hillsboro. Got a nice little pic. But this will be a very tough game. This is a game that was relatively close last year. Remember, we brought this up before we started going through the schedule. This will be a tough game. You got Blake Shappen for Baylor coming back at quarterback. And we brought him up earlier, but Dominic Richardson, we didn't mention by name, but Dominic Richardson transferred from Oklahoma State. You got Richard Reese as well, who had 900 plus yards last season. So you got one of the better running back duos, potentially one of the better running back duos in the Big 12. And for a team that's more defensive minded, this is big. Having a run first style is big for Baylor. Now, Dave Aranda does like to make his presence known on the defensive side of the ball. He did lose Siaki Ika to the NFL this past season, and you got the linebacking core, which is their main calling card on defense. You got the coolest names in the game at the linebacking position for Baylor. You have got the immortal Mike Smith and the immortal Matt Jones. Coolest name in all of college football for a linebacking. I refuse to find anybody that we brought up Steele Jansen, Rocco Beck. They pale in comparison to freaking Mike Smith and Matt Jones. I refuse to believe that. Now, Mike Smith transferred in from Liberty, but he'll be a boost to the linebacking core, and I do think Baylor, being at home, will get the dub over Iowa State. I do think they'll have enough in the tank, especially defensively, to halter whatever Iowa State has offensively going for them. They did lose some key players last year on defense, but I do like what Baylor has. So we're going to go them over Iowa State in this one. And then week 9, you got Iowa State's big-time rivalry game against Kansas. This is I remember back in the day, Kansas beat Iowa State. They stormed the field. Kansas beat Iowa State and stormed the field. This game is so odd. This is an odd game. I know Iowa State fans hate Kansas basketball. I don't know if the feeling's that really rich in the football sense of things, but Iowa State versus Kansas is a good matchup. Like, Jalen Daniels at quarterback's a very good player. Kansas got good secondary pieces as well, in the form of Kobe Bryant and Kenny Logan. Like, they've got options at secondary, but we're going to go Iowa State in this one. It's been a while since we said Iowa State was going to win a game. We're going to go Iowa State here, beating Kansas at Jack Trice Stadium. And then speaking of rivalry games, we got Iowa State's long-time hated rival, BYU. Now, we are going to Provo, Utah, which is one of the toughest places to play in all of college football. And this is going to be an interesting game because they're a newcomer. They lost the likes of Jaron Hall this offseason, Puka Nacua. all went to the NFL. So you brought in Kedon Slovis to the quarterback position. Remember, he was really good at USC his freshman year. Then he messed up his arm, wasn't really the same. Caleb Williams came in, transferred to Pitt, and didn't really have that success that we thought he would have. Like, you look at what Kenny Pickett did with Pat Narduzzi, you would expect Kenny Pickett or Kedon Slovis to do something similar there, but it just didn't work out there. Ended up transferring to BYU instead. Also got a good running back partner as well in the form of Aiden Robbins, who transferred into UNLV. Like, good options in the backfield for BYU. And in front of them, you got one of the best tackles in all of college football in Kingsley Suamatia. Like, you got a very, one of the best tackles, one of the most athletic tackles in all of college football. Will definitely be considered one of the best tackles in the draft. We brought up Olu Fashanu in the last video. You also got the likes of Joe Alt from Notre Dame, J.C. Latham from Alabama, but they've got that option there on the offensive line. Defensively, they brought in like 100 Weber State transfers. A bunch of Weber. Like, you brought in 3 defensive transfers from Weber State and 1 offensive transfer. Like, stop picking on Weber State, man. We'll talk about them in tomorrow's video against UNI. Like, you stole some key secondary pieces in the form of Kendon Garrett and Eddie Heckard. Like, you brought in some key players there that are both going to be starting for BYU this coming season. They just released their depth chart. Both of them are listed as stars. So, key additions in the transfer portal for BYU. And in this rivalry game, though it's an intense historic battle that's back and forth as all rivalries, but I will say that we're going to have BYU winning this one. It's in Provo. Again, insanely tough place to play. We're going to have BYU winning this one over Iowa State. And the second to last week of the year, the preseason favorite by far to win the Big 12 is coming to Ames in the form of Texas. And Texas got some very good players in the roster. You got like Quinn Ewers, who expected to take that leap this year. You got the likes of Adonai Mitchell out wide. Xavier Worthy, one of the best receivers in college football. You lost Bijan Robinson. You lost Roshan Johnson, but CJ Baxter comes in as a true freshman and could very well, I'm not going to say completely replicate what those two did, especially Bijan Robinson, but he's going to be a very solid option for them. Quinn Ewers in Steve Sarkisian's system for a second year is going to be big. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you got like Jalen Catalon transferring from Arkansas. Very good player if he can stay healthy. That's the big question mark surrounding Jalen Catalon, who would be one of the best safeties in all of college football and in the NFL draft if he can just stay freaking on the field. And then you got the likes of Sweat and Sorrell on the defensive line as well. And you've got some serious problems for Iowa State in this game. But, I raise you this. Iowa State has one random ass game a year where they beat somebody at home they have no business of beating. Like, I remember them beating Oklahoma with Spencer Rattler. I remember them beating West Virginia when they were number 2. I remember them beating Oklahoma State. Like, they beat teams they're not supposed to be at home all the time. And with the hatred of the University of Texas in Ames, Iowa, horns down be flying everywhere. Weirdly, the 3-win to this point Cyclones, I'm going to have beating Texas.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
As stupid as that sounds, as outrageous as that sounds, it seems to happen every single year. I don't know why it happens, how it happens. I can't explain it, but I just have that feeling. Iowa State will beat Texas. That home crowd will be absolutely rocking, and we're going to have the Cyclones win. Surprisingly, have the Cyclones win. And in the final game of the season, you got Farmageddon against Kansas State, the reigning Big 12 champs. This is a team that you lost by 1 point to last year, 10-9, which is ironically the same week as Iowa's insane 6-9 game against Illinois. Like, great week for the state of Iowa in college football. But Kansas State is going to be a tough game. Chris Kleiman's always got them working over there in Kansas State. They got a quarterback upgrade in ways with Will Howard. I say in ways because Will Howard was there last year, but he rotated a lot with Adrian Martinez. You know, Adrian Martinez would have those moments where people, like, remember back in the day, Adrian Martinez was always a dark horse Heisman candidate, and then people would go, oh yeah, he's Adrian Martinez. That's kind of what happened last year. Like, he'd have these games where he just rushed for a bunch of yards, and then he'd have another game like, oh, that's not a Heisman candidate. That's Adrian Martinez. And Will Howard to come in and play really well. And yeah, losing Deuce Vaughn is not going to be easy. Deuce Vaughn was a very important player for them. But you bring in Trayshawn Ward from Florida State, who's a back-to-back 500-yard rusher there. And then you also have one of the best O-lines in the conference as well, with Cooper Beebe being the main guy on the offensive line. And I think just Kansas State will have too much to get against Iowa State in this game. With it being on the road, Kansas State's going to be a lot of people's dark horse to win. I don't even know if you call him dark horse. I mean, can you call a reigning Big 12 champ a dark horse in the conference? Can you do that? Can you do that? I don't think you can. But they're going to be one of the fun picks to win the conference this year, and I don't think Iowa State will be able to beat them. I don't think they will. In Manhattan, not that one. In Manhattan will be a tough place to play. I'm going to have Kansas State winning that one, and we're going to have Iowa State finish the season at 4-8. At 4-8 is what we have Iowa State. Is that mean? Is that correct? Is that whatever? Is that too lenient? Maybe they're going to lose way more games than that. Maybe they do lose to Texas, which they probably will. Maybe they do lose to Oklahoma State, which they probably will. But there's a bunch of games. Maybe they beat UNI. Maybe they beat Iowa. There's a lot of games that could go 50-50 because we just don't know about Iowa State this year. There's a lot of question marks to be seen. But for this video, we're going to have them going 4-8. That's our final prediction. Let me know how you feel about it. Down in the description below, let me know how you think Iowa State will do this year. I got told I looked like I sound uneducated. So maybe that's a case here as well. Make sure to check out episode 1 of the State of Iowa previews where we talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes. The UNI Panthers video will be tomorrow, so make sure you stay tuned for that. I've been Logan Blackman. I will see you guys later. Peace.